everyone. I'm very excited to interview Jeremy Graham, CTO of Zipgen, and I can't thank you enough about the courses you have developed. Like it has been a great inspiration for people like me who got into Grasshopper because of the amazing courses and content you have out there. So thanks a lot for it. And I can't wait to see what you have developed at Zipgen because I saw the gifts and it looks a very promising product.
Thank you very much. And look, thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. It's always a pleasure to talk about, what I'm doing and what's happening in the industry. It's always great to share what we've been working on. And look, I appreciate the feedback from the courses as well. It's always fun putting those together, and it's even better to hear that people are learning from them and enjoying them. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. So, Jeremy, can you talk about your background, where you grew up, and out of all things you could do in life, why you chose architecture?
Yeah, that's a pretty big question, but I'll try to answer it the best I can. So I got into architecture mainly because my father is a designer as well. He's always been in development of houses, and I grew up watching him. He's a designer builder, so I watched him design homes, and he's done very well in that area, and he's won awards. So I was always inspired by the work he was doing. So early on, always interested in architecture. So I got into architecture, obviously, did my 5 years, did a bit of work in various firms in Perth, WA, Western Australia, and then found my way into stadiums. So that's really where I found my niche, was in stadium design. I was always interested in the large scale. And from there, things just kind of sort of kept developing. But it was really those I guess, being inspired by my dad to get into architecture. And it's taken me many places, and I think that's the great thing about architecture, is you're really not confined to one area or one task. You can really explore a lot of different lot of different specialties, and I'm lucky that I've found an area that I love working in architecture.
I see. And at what point of time you had made the transition of learning scripting, coding in
Yeah.
architecture journey?
Yeah, so it was a big turning point for me. So um, I skipped over a bit there, but after university, I got into an awards program where I was awarded a 2 year um, internship, basically. It meant that you would spend 6 months in four different firms over 2 years. So it was a way to get broad experience very quickly. And so that was very exciting. So I spent my first 6 months at Cox Architecture, and then my second 6 months in government doing project management. So project managing the construction of state infrastructure. And then the program fell apart. I think it was around the GFC, and there wasn't enough work for these firms to take on someone for 6 months that they knew they were going to lose after 6 months. So that program ended, and so I spent a bit of time in government. Basically, they let me stay on for a while I kind of found my feet. And at that point, I was really lucky that a colleague of mine, or someone I met there, introduced me to his, I think it was his stepbrother in London, who was working in stadium design at AECOM Sport. And so we started chatting, and at this time, I hadn't done any scripting, so I never really got onto scripting in university. I would have loved to, but it really wasn't my kind of area back then. Anyway, I got invited to go to UK and work in the AECOM Sports team, specifically because they were working on the bid for the Perth Stadium, and I guess they wanted someone, a local, to be on their team and offer any input that they could. So I was really lucky that I got invited to go over there. So that was my first sort of, I guess, experience with scripting, because in the sports world, or in the sports design, scripting is just a necessity. You can't really do a stadium unless you're doing some form of scripting. And so that really opened my eyes. I was really blown away by some of the work they were doing there, and it was a very inspirational group as well. They'd been doing stadiums all over Europe, US, and so I really either had to learn how to do it or get out. And so I started actually with Dynamo of all things. Um, they had all their scripts for Grasshopper to do Stadium, so it's not like I could really rewrite what they were doing. So I took it upon myself to develop a Stadium script in Dynamo, and that was, jumping into the deep end a bit because these scripts can get pretty hefty, and it also meant a bit of Python scripting because there's a lot of recursion in Stadium design, so I was forced to do Python to learn that. So that was my first kind of tinkering with scripting, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I I was never really a good designer in school. I kind of got by and I did what I have to, but I really found my niche when I learned scripting, and that's what I love to do. And ever since then, it's been a passion. So I've kind of just continued to develop from there.
I see. And how has your perspective and interest in technology evolved through time from your undergrad
Yeah.
grad to this date?
Yeah. So I mean, I think I guess in my, in university, I was a bit naive and I didn't really understand what you could do with technology or specifically software development. When I learned how to script, as I'm sure you can relate, it really opens your eyes as to what is possible. And I think it kind of breaks down some of the walls or some of the limitations of the technology and tools you're using. So, um, suddenly, one day I'm using Revit and I think, oh, I can only put this type of wall there. But once you learn scripting, you realize there's a, whole other world behind the user interface that you can tinker with. It becomes a lot funner to use those tools. So I guess over time, from scripting, I really got into, getting into the APIs of the tools I was using and really exploring them. Like even Grasshopper and Dynamo are quite limited in their user interface. And so once you realize you don't even have to use that interface, you can get into the APIs directly. It opens up a lot of kind of possibilities. And so I guess it sparks a lot of curiosity. The more you learn about this technology, the more you want to learn and the more you realize is possible.
I I see. And are there any forums or community support or learning resource you recommend for someone who wants to do similar work?
Yep. So I guess I was really early on. I was on the Dynamo forum a lot. I don't have this specific address, but if you search Dynamo forum, I'm sure you'll find it. The group that are hanging around there are extremely helpful. So everyone wants to help each other, and it was really at that time when I was using that forum. It was when Dynamo just kind of come out, so it was just everyone was keen to learn off each other, and they still are. I'm surprised. I go back there now and again just to see if I can provide some sort of input, and I'm still seeing the same people offering a lot of advice. So that's, I guess, for general scripting and Dynamo and even Grasshopper to an extent, I'd recommend that for sure. And of course, there's the Grasshopper forum as well, which is a huge help, and it's been around for so long now that most problems you come across you can often find they're already solved.
I see. So we heard about Jeremy working in Stadium, doing scripting, and now you have developed Zipgen, which is on interior design skill. Like there's a whole spectrum
Yeah.
behind it. Like tell us the story, what got you started into Zipgen and like early
Yeah.
ideations.
So I guess I'll go back a little bit before that, which is after stadiums. I got into I was working for a group over in the US, HDR. I eventually moved into that group, which was called the Data Driven Design Group. And from there, as soon as I joined that group, I transitioned, I guess, from your traditional architecture role into more software development. So I spent a lot of time there listening to architects and engineers. So they're a multidisciplinary firm, and basically listening to their workflows and their problems, and then building tools for them. That started doing tools such as, plugins for Rhino, and then it evolved into some sort of web tools and sort of things that there's a general sort of direction of these tools over my career getting more and more user friendly. Scripting is great for one person, but often not a group of people because it can get pretty tangled. But I was constantly, with all my kind of new tools, I was constantly moving in the direction of trying to make them more user friendly and easy to use, not just for architects, but everyone. Excuse me, I don't just put my power in my laptop. Just give me a second. It's just running out. Um, so I was with the data driven design team, and that's where I started building standalone tools. So outside of any sort of 3D modeling software, building web tools using things like 3JS and D3JS and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. And I think once getting into web development, you realize that there's so many possibilities and so many things you can do with very not many limitations. It's really what you can come up with. There's some way to build it. So that opened up my eyes a lot more getting into that area. And Zipgen specifically, I got approached by a couple of guys that had this idea around generative design and kitchens, but they needed someone to help bring that idea into sort of build it into something that people could use. So that was sort of mid 2020. I think I started talking to them about this idea, and we did a few workshops and planned this idea out. And then eventually, at the end of October, I think it was October 2020, I left the architecture industry basically and joined these guys full time and started developing it. And so it's been a pretty wild journey. I mean, so it's been in development for about 12 months now. And we had to build the whole thing from scratch, and it's been a lot of sort of ups and downs, but where we've got to I'm very proud of, and I know the whole team's proud of it. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. And you're the CTO, and like I'm so proud, like journeying from architecture to scripting to professional software developer. And can you
Mm.
elaborate, like initially you were mentioning about graphical user interface. So I'm assuming it was in Rhino Revit world of C Sharp .NET, and then you went into the web development world of 3JS, so more
Mm.
JavaScript level. So what are the
Yep.
programming languages or libraries you learned along this way which were useful?
Yes, that's a good question. So early on, Python was the kind of go-to, given that it's kind of Dynamo supported it and Grasp supports it. So that was an easy language to kind of jump into immediately. And I often get asked, which language should I start with? And in my opinion, it really doesn't matter at all, because it's making learning one language. The main thing is learning the principles behind it and the why of what you're doing. So after I learnt Python, and it was a pretty high level that I learnt it really, being just for scripting. I then learnt about how to use the API. I think it was the Revit API I started with, and then learning how to make plugins. And for that, I transitioned into C Sharp just because it's a lot easier, and especially when you're doing plugins and that sort of thing, the editing tools such as Visual Studio are a lot easier to use. And I guess I fell in love with C Sharp a bit. I found it much easier to read and write than I did Python. And I haven't really looked back since. I don't use Python too often anymore. I use C Sharp for everything. So when I got into plugins, so .NET Core and the rest of it, eventually, I realized I could write plugins for Revit, and then it was Rhino, and then doing it for Dynamo and Grasshopper. That kind of just naturally progressed, and I started to get interested in design patterns and that sort of thing. And it was really just a lot of reading and learning that you can never stop learning with this stuff. And I'm continuing to learn today. But I, being in the C Sharp world, I started looking at ASP.NET Core and that sort of thing. So on the web side of things, building a sort of completely .NET stack, and that's what Zipgen is at the moment. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the UI sort of thing, I was building a lot of UIs for. So I think you asked what was a graphical interface, or what was the stack. I was building UIs for, so in Rhino, building a plugin, and then I'd have a standalone sort of window. I'm just trying to remember what it was I used. It's been a while now. WPF.
Windows,
So using
yeah, Windows presentation format. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I started learning that stuff, and that is a little bit tricky, but it was it was a lot of fun building these overlays over tools, and then giving that to an architect or an engineer to use, and just you know allowing them to use these things simply was a real joy to see that kind of develop. I think you. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me
I,
now?
I can. Yeah.
Oh, maybe this. Sorry for that. So, I'm curious. Like when you were thinking about the tech stack for Zipgen, like what were
Mm.
the options you had? What were the cloud deployment availability, and how you made those decisions about the architecture of this app?
Yeah. Look, I think with Zipgen, it was a bit of a no. Like it was a we didn't really well, when we started, there was a bigger group. We worked with we basically got a bunch of developers in to help us boost it at the start, and the majority of the developers that we got in were .NET, .NET developers, um, and so really it wasn't. We didn't really consider alternatives in that regard, but we did consider alternatives in the different libraries, such as what sort of front end library we're using, what sort of databases we're using, what 3D library we're using. All those sort of little things were difficult to decide on, but eventually we kind of went down the road where we have because initially it was just building an MVP, right? So we had people that were familiar with certain libraries, and they were sort of naturally selected along the way, which would assist the team. We didn't want to start an MVP where half the team's trying to learn this new stack or these new libraries. So we really went with what was the least painful but got us where we wanted to get to, and that's where we landed, which was, I've got a completely ASP.NET core in the back end, and then we're using React on the front end. And we're actually, with our 3D library, we landed on Unity, which is that was a difficult decision. But given the sort of out of the box functionality with Unity, it made sense at the time.
So, Unity is acting as a viewer or in the front end.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Unity is the viewer. Yep. So we build that to WebGL. That gets deployed, and then we've got, I guess, the GD or the generative design component is a standalone API or function that is separated from everything else. And then we've got our stock standard databases and API and the rest of it. But really, the renderer, that's been a bit of a journey to get that right, because we had to make it in a way that all the models were adaptable. We could generate these designs and display them quickly and accurately, and we also get a decent render on the front end. It's quite difficult sometimes, especially when there's so many different types of machines and specifications that people access the website on.
Got it. So if I get it right, when someone modifies the option on the front end, it makes the request on the back end to do the compute, and it re-renders on the front end about the new generative option, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the front end and the render, it's quite dumb in a sense that it doesn't do any sort of manipulation or calculation in the geometry side of things. That is all handled by a function in the back end, which was kind of, the past 12 months, like, as I mentioned, have been a lot of up and downs, but where all that kind of logic sits has been it's been kind of a lot of debate, and because the generative design function was never initially wasn't designed to be an editing tool. It was initially meant to be, you give it some parameters, it generates the best design it can, and it gives it back to you, and it's done with its job. But now we've gotten into the area where we're becoming a sort of a bit of an editing tool. So the GD, or the generative design function, is now has to be able to translate designs and make updates to them and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's gotten a lot bigger than it was initially planned to be, which is a good thing, really. It's getting better.
Yeah, and I saw the demo video and it looked like very performant and like quick rendering. So like great job on developing the whole app in that case. And I'm
Thank you very
wondering like
much.
about the format of the file we are
Yep,
dealing with. So I looked at IFC.js and they are using WASM WS
yep.
for the rendering. Like what format are we dealing on the front end, like the file format and
Yeah, so the file format is really just a JSON data structure. It's designed. We've got a very talented team that have spent a lot of time thinking and getting that data structure right because this tool is constantly expanding. Unless that data structure is designed in a way that it can scale, we'd have a lot of issues otherwise. So it's it's basically a JSON, and that tells you that you can probably pull it off the web if you really wanted to and have a look at it. But that basically describes the room. It describes all the components within that room, all their properties and qualities. And so the renderer is designed to take one of those JSON files and render whatever it tells it to render.
got it?
And the advantage of that is it's very quick to send and very I guess interoperable with all of our different tools.
I see. And I'm assuming like if you have the JSON file format, depending on the export function, one could, if they want to integrate in, let's say, Rhino or Revit, you might have the flexibility of importing in that format in the software.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not really tied to any particular file format other than JSON, but we're not really. Yeah, we can send it to any new sort of module that we have, and it can be easily read and translated. So in the future, if we ever want to be, interoperable with, let's say, Revit, we could quite simply write a plugin in Revit which reads that JSON. It's pretty extendable in that sense.
Got it. And what has been the most challenging part as a job like role for CTO? And like how does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of challenges, but I think CTO is really it's probably a bit inaccurate in the sense that given that we're a startup, I don't spend all of my time just in the technology side of things. So I'm sort of working with the team and managing the sprints and getting all the tasks set up that we have to so we all know what to do. And in addition to that, there's a bit of work around the planning and that sort of thing. So I guess the most challenging bit is initially the generative design algorithm. So initially we weren't entirely sure that it would work, and if it did work, it would be fast enough. That was the initial trouble, or I guess difficulty. Once that is finished, it's really, or once that was solved, it's really been um, getting, I guess, getting the planning right and getting make sure that we're headed in the right direction. We have all the right sort of, we're getting the right feedback and we're implementing that correctly. It's become less about the complexities of the technology and more about the usability and the, I guess, and the cadence of the team and that sort of thing. So that's, I guess, the more challenging part of it now. It's the technology is, we're all confident in it and we all know that it can do what we want it to do. So it's kind of changed over the past 12 months. And I think as we grow, I think it'll remain that sort of, managing the team and managing the direction of the product will be the difficult part or the challenge. But I say it's been a challenge, but it really hasn't been that hard because we've got such an amazing team as well. So yeah, there's been a lot of little challenges along the way, but it's all for good reason.
I see. And what's on the roadmap for Zipgen for 2022?
Yeah, well, 2022 is going to be a big year for all of us, I think. We're planning to basically expand what it does. So at the moment we do kitchens. So we decided to choose kitchens. Initially, we're looking at kitchens and bathrooms, and we thought, look, if we want to do it, let's just focus on one and get that right. And we went with kitchens because it was deemed the most challenging part of the house to automate, really. And I'm quite confident that we assessed that correctly. It's been a real challenge getting the algorithm in the position we want it to be to work correctly. But now that we have kitchens, and we'll continue to expand on kitchens, because it's a very there's so many different ways you can design a kitchen that it'll I think we'll always be working on that part of it. But we do have plans to move into other areas of the house. So starting with bathrooms, we'll automate bathrooms. We've also been getting surprisingly a lot of people asking for laundries. So laundries will be another one on the roadmap for 2022. And we also want to make it make the tool more accessible. So making it much more user friendly on tablets, and also looking at some other technologies such as point cloud data and how we can integrate that with showing the kitchen in the space in real time, which would be great.
That's awesome. Like I think like the focus you have for solving like bathroom, kitchen is the need in every project, and like we need
Mm-hmm.
like better tools to do that task. So like thanks a lot for addressing that problem and the need. And I think
Thank
this
you.
might be a good time to showcase like a demo of Zipgen.
Yep, yeah, I'd be happy to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the development website, because we're actually pushing a bunch of changes to the production website today. So it probably makes sense to show the development website, but later on today, the main website will be reflected in what I'm about to show you, or will reflect it. So I'm just going to share my screen. If you just bear with me a second, I might just turn that off for a second.
Yep.
I just need to log in. One minute. Sorry, I should have had this prepared. Almost there.
No problem. This is the challenge of live stream. Anything can
I
happen.
thought I was super prepared, but obviously not. Okay, so I'll just share it again. Can you see my screen all right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So this is the website, Zipgen, and basically it's so you just want to run through of the whole tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a website that is designed to be, or a tool that's designed to be used by builders, designers, kitchen fabricators. So initially, a little bit of history about it is the initial development was geared towards homeowners, and so it had to be very user friendly. But what we found with some initial feedback was that homeowners weren't really too familiar with using 3D modeling tools, and that became, as simple as we made the tool, it was still challenging for a lot of people. So we did a bit of a pivot in early this year, and now we're focusing really on B2C. So the tool is designed to be used by designers, builders, and kitchen fabricators. So with that in mind, I'll jump in. I've currently logged in as our support account, and basically within the account, you can go in and create a new design. So this is designed to be used in a way that you might have a builder, and he's got various clients, and at any time you could open up a client file and make some adjustments to it, or download the report. So I'll go ahead and jump in and create a design. And this is where it's booting up our renderer. So is my screen really dark, or is it just me?
Yeah, it's a bit.
Okay. And so what you're seeing is a WebGL renderer sitting within the what we call the wizard. And the way we've designed the tool, again, is to be quite user-friendly. So you go through a series of steps with the client, and throughout those steps, our design structure, our design file is populating all the parameters we need for our generative design function to then generate a kitchen. So initially, we've started with rectilinear rooms, and this is based on our research, where the vast majority of kitchens or new kitchens being designed were of a rectilinear shape. However, we're currently working on, polygon or polyline number of or sort of more faces to the room, basically. But for the time being, you start with a simple room shape, and you can adjust the size of it as you need. You can do that by hand or by specifically putting in the size of the room. You can also select the number of walls. So based on these 4 arrangements, you can get 99% of the kitchen or kitchen zones that you need. So at any point you can transition from 2D to 3D as well. So as you can see here, there's a sort of bunch of view controls down the bottom. And at any point you can reset the design or undo. So once you've got the room shape or the room size that you want, you can place windows and doors. And this is basically as it sounds. You can put a window down and drag and move it around, make it bigger. And that's basically allows the user to set up the room shape that they're working with. So for example, there's a little door you can put in, or you can delete it. Once you've got that in there, this is where we get into the more kitchen design. And the starting point is always selecting the type of kitchen layout. So you've got single, galley, L shape, U shape, and G shape. In addition to that, you can select an island and move that around, or move or make the benches longer or shorter, wherever it might be. So this allows the user to set up with the client, in this area of the kitchen, that's where it's going to be. We're going to put an island about here, and there you go. So with that information, the next piece is to select the types of appliances. So if you can imagine that a kitchen fabricator is using this tool with their client, they could come to a set of appliances together that they want to put in their kitchen with specific sizes. And this list is pretty straightforward at the moment, but we're continuing to expand on the different types of appliances and bits and pieces you can add in here. So we're looking at wine fridges and built-in coffee machines. That's another big item for 2022, is to really expand on the amount of appliances that you can put in. And so once you've got that, the next step will then take all that information, so room size, window placement, door placement, appliances, and use that information to generate a design. So you can see it sometimes loads for a second or two. That's basically gone and pinged the generative design function 5 different times and asked it to run 5 different run-throughs of the algorithm and get the best 5 results. So that function is doing, each time it generates about 30,000, or it analyzes about 30,000 different arrangements. So so we're really analyzing about 150,000, or not really, it's about 30,000, but they've given 5 different sets of tweaks to look at different arrangements. So that was the first big I think when we realized how fast we could get this stuff, it was pretty exciting. So initially we were worried it might take 10 or 15 seconds to run these algorithms, but at the moment we've got them down to about, I think, a little less than half a second to do a run through. So that was really promising when we cracked that, and this algorithm's continuing to get optimized and optimized, so it should hopefully get faster over time. So anyway, you get your design back, and the idea is that you're given 5 back, which are really not the end result, because as you'd be aware, you can't really. It's very difficult to say here's your best design because it's such a subjective decision that you can't really say that this is the best, because for 2 different people they may have a different idea of what the best is. So what this tool does is it gives I guess 5 different guides to a kitchen, and there's a bunch of different optimizations in the algorithm that make some decisions around what the likely position of some of these appliances might be. So for example, the sink, 9 times out of 10 you want the sink under the window, the fridge at the end of the bench, and a whole bunch of other things. So we quickly recognize that we can get the kitchens 80% of the way there, but the designer is always going to want to make some tweaks. So what we've been working on over the past few months is allowing those editing functions within the tool. So for example, a fridge, if you didn't like it there, you can always grab it and move it over to the other side. And what that's doing is going back to the generative design function with some priorities and saying we actually want the fridge over here. And so it updates it and sends it back. Also with cabinets, you may not always want a big pantry there, so you can select the cabinet and switch that down to ground, for example. Every time you do this sort of thing, it goes back to the algorithm and regenerates it. And it does that because it's making a lot of very specific adjustments. So it optimizes the location of every dressing panel, which you can see here on the fridge on either side, and also in the corners there's some pretty complex panel arrangements sometimes. Every time you make an edit to the kitchen, it needs to assess those, that none of those have gone awry because of it. So that was another reason we had to get the algorithm quite fast, is because if you're editing it in real time, you want it to be as seamless as possible. And then there's other editing functions. For example, you can select a cabinet, you could split it, turn it into 2 if you want, or you could change the face of it to different types, like a 4-drawer, for example. These are other areas that we're constantly expanding on and constantly adding different options to it. We've just been doing a bit of work on islands as well, which we'll continue to develop, but islands are often a kind of a centerpiece of the kitchen, so we're working on a bunch of different options to try different arrangements of islands, such as what you're saying here. So yeah, the editing piece, I'm just trying to think what else there is. There's a constant sort of I guess there's overhang. We can change the types of benches and that sort of thing, but this is an area that's constantly developing, and we develop it as we get feedback of how people want to all those different sort of adjustments they want to make in the kitchen. After this point, once you've got to the design you like, that's where we get into the render step. And in the render step, it's really as it sounds, where it's about rendering the kitchen, adjusting the materials, getting the kitchen to a position that the user is, falls in love with it, basically. And this is where we're finding the kitchen is of great help to kitchen fabricators, because the current workflow with these businesses is often that they describe a kitchen, they have to send that kitchen idea to a modeler, the modeler models up the kitchen, gets out a renderer after a day or 2, and then that's the first time that the client has to actually see what the kitchen might look like. What this tool is basically, or the problem that it's solving, is it cuts that design decision time down to minutes rather than days. So at any point here you could make a whole bunch of different material changes for the for the user to see how it will look in their kitchen in a real-time render. And so we're quite happy with the result, because it's really allowing people to get the kitchen or get the design they want much faster. There's a whole bunch of different editing functions in here as well. So things like changing all the handles on different cabinets, or as you saw I just did a minute ago, changing the color of different cabinets. This is, again, this is an area that we're constantly adding to and will continue to add to. We've got some basic themes down here which updates the types of panels that you're seeing here and handles, but we'll continue to develop and add more to all the functions at this step. And also the appliances. We recognize that not everyone wants a highly polished range hood, so we've got a whole a huge collection of appliances that will be making their way in early next year. So yeah, that's really the design, or the extent of the design tool. And this is often the spot that the user will get to with their client. They're happy with the design and they want to go ahead with it. So in the background, it's always saving the design, and the user can always open it up. There's one last function that we've been building in, which is again continuing to develop, but the idea that the user can then take that design, take it home with them, and always, you know, use it as a reference. So at any point, the user can select to download the report, and this is bespoke to each builder. So if you're signed in as a builder, you would have uploaded your specific branding, your specific logo, and this report basically takes that information and generates a simple report. There's still a bit of work that's happening in the camera module, so how it takes images of the kitchen. At the moment, it just takes images of everything, to sort of a bit of a broad stroke over the whole thing. But that's another area which we're currently working on at the moment, which is getting really custom and unique screenshots of the kitchen. It can sometimes take a minute because it's a relatively large PDF, and my internet's not great, but we can see it's there. And so what it does is it generates this little report. So that logo is a placeholder that's in our profile, but you can see some of the shots it's taken, and some of the bad shots that it's taken, which we're working on. But the idea is that it gets a shot of all the different angles in the kitchen. The homeowner can take that away with them, or they can send this to their fabricator to then put together the CNC drawings. And then you've got sections and elevations, which are all dimensioned, and the rest of it, which all gets automated. So yeah, this is an area that you'll see a lot of change in the new year as we're expanding on the drawing capability of the renderer, to get these drawings looking really nice. Having an architecture background, as I'm sure you can relate, I've got a very specific way of what the drawing should look like, and I think now that we've got the generative design and the renderer working well, we'll focus quite a lot on that in the near future.
I must
that's
admit,
basically it. Yeah,
Jeremy. Sorry? I must admit, Jeremy, it's incredible job on user interface and performance of the app. Like, I could only imagine like all the functions you are doing and calling at the back end when a user is changing the material, changing the arrangement, and within seconds you're generating it. That's super great. And like it also allows playfulness in the design, where I can tweak it and do many iterations because it's very quick. It's a great job.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I think as I mentioned, the whole team is very proud of where we've got it to, and that was an area that we were uncertain of early on, as to the speed of this stuff. But I think with the way that WebGL was headed, and some of the online services and libraries that we have access to, it's just it's come a long way. And I think I never imagined that this generative design function would be used as a way to edit designs, but I'm quite happy with where it's ended up, and I really appreciate the feedback. The UI is a particular area that's constantly changing because that's probably been one of the biggest challenges now that I think of it, to actually get the UI friendly enough that it can get all the information we need from the user, but the user also isn't overwhelmed by options. And yeah, it's very tricky to get that right. And I think we've still got a bit of way to go, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it's easy for someone like myself or yourself that have used tools like Rhino or Revit to intuitively understand how to use this stuff. But to get someone that doesn't use those tools using the tool, that's been the challenge. And I think it's in the right spot.
got it. And I was thinking, like, since it's using Unity, what if there's a possibility where I have like and you said one could use it on iPad and like mobile apps too, because like rectifying it. So
Yep.
what if there is an AR app where I could also project this and doing like design and option creation in when I just got my like flat or apartment and I want to try different create kitchen layout, I could just do design and just project this into that world.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the way that augmented reality is headed, it's not too far off. And from what I read and understand, that a lot of web tools are now have built-in, you can do point cloud scanning through the web. I obviously don't know enough about it just yet, but the idea is that we'll use web technology to access the phone or tablet's camera and do point cloud scanning through that. And I think, I've had a bit of I've tested building some AR apps in the past using Unity, and from what I can recall, it's not too difficult. So I'm quite confident that, in 2022, you'll see the ability to project this kitchen into a room. And also using point cloud data to extract the parameters, I think would be quite exciting. I think rather than having the user to set up, the room and the windows, be able to get that information from a point cloud scan would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm quite confident we'll get there sooner rather than later. I think the reason it's not, I guess, where not tablet or mobile ready just yet is because we have focused primarily on getting the technology right, getting the tool right, and then going into a more a tablet design. You could actually use it in your tablet right now if you really wanted to. It's just some of the UI isn't optimized for it.
got it. And I'm so glad to see that we got to see the first like demo and hands-on working. And I'm
Mm.
wondering, since the assets are in JSON format, one could
Yep.
also assign, like, let's say, cost or embodied carbon footprint in these assets, and in the report, one could see like total cost, total embodied carbon.
Yep. Oh yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that was the thinking early on. The the data structure is designed specifically for that reason. So we're building in functionality around generating bill of quantities and that sort of thing. And the design structure of the design file is designed in a way that we can easily pull quantities out of it. So you bang on, and I should have mentioned that earlier on, that is another sort of 2022 is getting more information out of the model and the drawings, so that the builder doesn't have to do that work. We're also looking at building in automated quotations into it. So the builder puts in their set unit prices, and based on that information and the design file, we can generate estimates and bill of quantities that are tailored specifically to that builder. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think the design of that design file has, it allows us a lot of room to build in those sort of functionality or functions.
I see. And I was
Mm.
wondering, like, for this generative layout, and if it's not confidential, Can you talk about like if it considers accessibility or some code compliance aspect in the layout generation, and like what kind of metrics you are using to evaluate the design?
Yep. It does. It does. There are. I can't get too detailed, but they are. It's doing some general kitchen requirements about proximities of certain elements to each other and also to different key points in the kitchen. So, its location to overheads or ends of benches. That's quite an extensive fitness function, or I guess uh, analysis of each kitchen design, and that's constantly getting tweaked as well. But there isn't anything in there which is state specific or country specific yet. We have had some feedback from some builders that would like to see some of that, those sort of specific rules in there. So we do have, plans to make it have the fitness function or those requirements change based on the location of the user. But that's still in the works. The the actual rules, we've designed it in a way that they change based on the type of kitchen as well. So if you've got like a U shape or an L shape, the fitness function or the algorithm will perform slightly differently. Um, but they're quite general at the moment, rather than location specific. If that answers your question.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering like uh, for example, if someone has to do custom asset, or like if let's say I am moving into this apartment but I have some furniture from my old apartment, like I'm curious, like are there any possibilities of like custom addition?
Hmm. Good question. Not at the moment, to be honest with you, but there is some functionality coming in probably early in the new year. It's currently getting worked on, where you can add in elements that haven't been generated. So, for example, if this overhead wasn't generated, you could have the option to put that in. As to um, what you mentioned with regard to having other furniture, that's probably a little bit further off. We're experimenting early on with you can set your, I guess, service areas in your kitchen. So if you have a space and you have, the water coming in a spot where you don't want it to, don't want to put too much plumbing in, you could set where the plumbing is basically. And we're also looking at putting in gas and the rest of it. However, we found with early user feedback that it really, they weren't too concerned about that. I think at this point, or the way the tool is being used, is kind of like if they know where the gas is, they can just move the stove over there rather than the algorithm using that early on.
Got it. And
Yeah.
one of the challenge when I was working with generative algorithms is like
Yeah.
sometimes to do like testing for the extreme cases, whether like it's feasible or not. Like, just wanted to know your thoughts. Like, if there are like extreme inputs, like are there any ways like you're testing the feasibility of the layout or something?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's been very difficult to deal with that because, as you're aware, because of the nature of the types of algorithms, there are so many potential pathways or possibilities in different outcomes that writing sort of, let's say, unit tests was early on. It was a bit out of the question because there were too many variable or too many possible outcomes. So um, basically, we have people testing it, doing QA testing on it, and basically thrashing it and using every possible iteration of kitchen they can think of. Um, but in terms of like if unit testing, if that's what you're asking, we don't do any specific unit testing around the generative part of it, which is the genetic algorithm part of it. Um, I guess it's been used so many times now that we that that part of the algorithm is we're quite confident. It's quite robust.
I see. And is Zipgen bootstrapped, or you have like investors?
Zipgen is privately funded at the moment, so we're not really seeking, I guess, uh, external funding at the moment. We've got a kind of clear runway ahead of us, and the plan now is to get as many people using the tool as we can, and you know, use that to grow it and expand on it. But I think the way we're headed at the moment, we've got a pretty tight knit team that yeah, will get us most of the way.
God. And what is the business model for Zipgen?
As in, we're a B2C platform, so we're doing subscription based, a SaaS platform where builders sign up and they can basically, with a monthly fee, they can use the tool as many times as they want, generate as many reports as they want. There's basically no real cap to it. We do have another, for larger builders having multiple users and that sort of thing, and another model for that. But for the most part, it's just a simple monthly subscription.
Got it. I have some non-technical questions. So before we move on, is there any technical part in this app or interface you'd like to share?
Uh, Not really. I think that's all of it. If you do have any other questions, feel free to ask them. But I think that's the extent of it.
Great development, and I'm so happy to see. So, Jeremy, I'm curious to know if you had unlimited time and resources, are there any ideas or startups or technology you wish you could develop?
Yeah, that's a big question. Oh, look, I've always been interested in augmented reality as an area to kind of play in. I'd love to, get a couple of HoloLens or something like that and build a cool AR tool. But I've got a few ideas knocking around up there, which, I'd love to explore, mainly around web-based tools. I think I'm really excited about WebGL and where that's headed. I think there's some amazing tools that are getting built in the architecture and engineering industry, and I think that's going to continue to increase and get better. So I'd love to just build all sorts of WebGL based tools and AR tools, and I just enjoy tinkering with new technologies and new libraries.
I see. And when you say about interested in WebGL, is it like the development in the physics simulation or graphical interface you're interested?
Yeah, I guess the physics is very interesting. The quality of the render of the output that we're getting. I mean, you look at the 3GS library. I think it's unbelievable what they're doing. So it's really how far you can take that in terms of its speed and its rendering output. I think it'd be a lot of fun to build some really high end rendering tools that utilize that, I think. And hopefully Zipgen gets there soon. We do have big plans to get the render output better, but that's a constant sort of tweaking and getting that right. The difficult thing at the moment is really making it good enough that people like the images, but not too good that it crashes their machine. So it's a bit of a fine balance.
Right. And is there any piece of advice you would like to share to future young CTOs in AEC tech space?
Yeah, look, I think I think the way the industry's headed in terms of you know young architects exploring technology is really exciting. I think if there's any advice, I'd say to keep testing and trying new tools. I think the it's exciting when you realize that there is no, we shouldn't be limited by the tools that we're presented with we should be trying to create new tools and new ways of doing things. And so, I mean, I think that would be my first advice is test and try and create new things, because it's limitless the amount of things we can build, and it's exciting when you build something new.
Got it. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on AI, blockchain, or metaverse opportunities in AEC.
Yeah, I mean, like AI, I think we're seeing some amazing stuff happen, particularly around GAN models and um, some of the kind of generative floor plan stuff that's coming out now. I'd love to take Zipgen in that direction in the near future, but it's I wish I had more time to try some of those stuff early on. I think a couple of years ago now, I built a GAN model, which was it allowed the user to draw a little house or a little box, a angled roof and a chimney, and then the GAN model tried to create a render of that house, and that was a lot of fun. And I think if I was a student or if I was just starting off in the computational world, I would be all over the AI part of the GAN and the that sort of side of things for sure. I think
Got
that is most certainly the future of, I guess, generative design.
it. And what about blockchain or metaverse?
Oh, look, I blockchain's interesting. I mean, I'm probably not smart enough to know how that's going to work in the AEC world. I mean, I you know I haven't seen any. I think there's been examples of ownership on the blockchain, or home ownership on the blockchain, but I don't know how that'll translate into the AEC. I wish I had some good ideas around that, because it'll no doubt impact us in some way. But yeah, I haven't seen anything new yet, or anything that I haven't seen how it's been used yet. But I'm excited to. Do you know of any good examples?
Yeah, like actually, I'm part of a DAO, decentralized autonomous
Oh yeah,
organization, and we
yep.
are developing like physical digital bridge using blockchain, like metaverse
Mm.
and IRL spaces. So, how
Wow,
is the crypto friendly or Web3 friendly design interaction looks like, and those type of
That's,
projects.
that sounds amazing. We'll have to chat more about that after the interview.
Sure. Uh, I have a rapid fire round for you, and you will have like 5 to 10 seconds to answer it. You gotta keep it brief.
Yep.
Cool. So, which city is in your travel bucket list?
Oh, Rome.
Your favorite movie?
uh, Interstellar.
Any technical or business book which made a big impact in your life?
Yes, the I've forgotten the name of it. Us Code. I'm forgetting the name of it. There's a software development book. Has a picture of a space or a universe on the front of it. I forget the name of it. I'll have to pull it out. I can't remember the name right now. But it was a specifically Clean Code. That's it. If you haven't
Clean
read
code,
it, I highly recommend it. It's a great book.
for sure. Thank you. Uh, your hobbies?
Um, Gym and guitar.
Hmm. Your role model?
Oh, jeez. I used to say Elon Musk, but I wouldn't say that anymore. um, Warren Buffett would be up there.
Your favorite open source project or library?
Um, the stuff that Hyper are doing, I think they're doing a great job. I think I forget the name of it. I think it's Elements, or they've got a I think they call it the smallest useful bin. But the guys at Hyper and the work they're doing in terms of their open source is really cool.
Got it. And lastly, anything you would like to share which we didn't cover in this interview?
Uh, I guess not not really. Other than I think we didn't really delve into stadiums too much, but I would say to anyone that wants to get into computational design, if they want to join a if they want to do computational design and architecture, join a sports team because you'll learn a lot.
That's awesome. Like I was at Bureau Happold as a structural
Oh yeah.
engineer, and they have
Mm,
a really good team in the stadiums, and I could
yeah.
relate like the competition design that happens.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think, and it's a good example of multiple different groups collaborating using scripting as well, which you don't really see too often. Well, not I didn't anyway when I was in architecture, but um, yeah, having the engineers and the architects work together on scripts and that sort of thing, it was really cool. And the some of the scripts that you come up with to do the roof and the structure and the bowl, it was just pretty exciting stuff.
I see. Uh, are we expecting a LinkedIn course for web development for AC?
Oh look, they I would love to, but they take up a lot of time. I think my days of putting courses together are probably a little bit behind me, only because I don't have the time I did when I put those courses together. But who knows? I've said that before, and then I did a couple more courses, so I could be wrong.
All right, yeah, we'll look forward to it. Uh,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. It was a great time, and the demo, I loved it. It's a great product, and good luck in this journey. And I hope we'll get to see another like. I'll host you in future to see like what are you guys up to and the new developments.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and thanks a lot for hosting myself and for putting this together. It's awesome to see you doing this and pulling in people from all over the AEC industry to talk about what they're doing. We often you know stare at the screen all day and don't hear about what other guys or people in the AEC industry are doing. So it's really awesome to see you doing these interviews and helping people share what they're doing.
My pleasure. It's a great honor to host people like you because I learn a lot, the community learns a lot, and it's inspiring to see such development.
Mm. Thank you. Really appreciate
Have a
it.
nice rest of your day. Ciao.
You too, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Well, you too. Happy holidays. Yeah.
Thank you.